I just watched JPEGMAFIA spit into a man's mouth. Volksgeist has a new video, Understanding JPEGMAFIA. Hopefully I can understand what I just witnessed. I don't know.
Good morning, Kanye.
Shut the fuck up.
There are very few figures in the music industry today who can match JPEGMAFIA's aggressive,
that was terrible,
chaotic energy. Peggy is a rapper and producer whose diverse style takes influence from Kanye, Bjork, Radiohead, Talking Heads, Arca, and even Chief Keef, and he's become a massive counterculture punk icon in the last few years. He speaks his mind and he pisses off as many people as he possibly can in the process. While the unorthodox sound and anarchistic political messaging of his music is often compared to death grips,
I was about to say, do not bring up death grips.
Into the music industry with a self-made mix of futuristic,
young blood spitting,
R&B, trap, and noise.
I think I saw that one, but neither one of those are anywhere near as bad as that one video. That one video. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, bro. I don't know who posted it. I think I blocked him. But if you know, I'm not even gonna bring it up because you don't want to know, bro. You don't. It was just weird. Yeah, it was gross, but it was just uncalled for. It was very uncalled for in a okay. Anyways,
sound.
Anyways, bro.
Messages that pull no punches. So how did this 32-year-old man go from a career in the military to making songs with titles like "I just killed a cop, now I'm horny"?
That's one of my favorite songs.
Wait until Morrissey dies. Let's understand JPEGMAFIA.
Black Ben Carson has some of the best song titles, I think. And All My Heroes does the best ones.
1989 in New York City. He spent his early childhood in Flatbush, a racially and economically diverse neighborhood in Brooklyn.
East Flatbush, you know.
Other artists like Flatbush Zombies, Joey Badass, Bobby Shmurda, and also Bernie Sanders. Anyway, when Peggy was 13, his family moved to Alabama, then later to Louisiana, where he would stay until he enlisted in the Air Force at 18 years old. He said in an interview, "A recruiter came to my school, and I was thinking, I have no other options. I could either die here, or at least I could get out of my situation." So he did what he had to do and joined the military.
Valid.
He was looking for a better life and trying to find a way out of
I know he said before that like he experienced a lot of racism firsthand in Alabama, and that's part of the reason why he went to the military, I think. But
a traumatic childhood. According to interviews, the military was a terrifying place for Peggy. He had no stake in the deadly war, and in his words, the military is a club of dick-swinging jocks. Even though he's been producing music as a hobby since he was 15, it wasn't until he was posted up in foreign countries with nothing but a computer and lots of downtime that he really started using music to express himself. Peggy was stationed all over the world, in Kuwait, Germany, Japan, and North Africa, and he even did a tour of duty in Iraq. You could probably imagine how those experiences informed or influenced the chaotic, industrial, discordant sound of his production. In the Air Force, Hendrix was known for vocally speaking out against the toxic culture of the military. Now, these confrontational tendencies may have isolated him at that point in time, but they would later become a trademark of his music and the online persona we all know and love today. Peggy first started doing house shows and small performances while he was stationed in Japan, and he was using the stage name Devin Hendrix. It was the positive feedback that he got from these amateur performances that gave him the confidence to try and pursue music.
Bro, looking at this GIF, all I can literally hear, he's like, weed, cracking dope.
Today, Peggy
is all I can hear right now.
Small performances while he was stationed in Japan, and he was using the stage name Devin Hendrix. It was the positive feedback that he got from these amateur performances that gave him the confidence to try and pursue music, something he truly loved as a career. Traveling around the world for the military, he ended up in a dark place mentally. He talks about feeling alienated, lonely. He was in a place in a culture he clearly didn't belong in, and this really does reflect in the sound of his early music. He released 4 mixtapes during his time in the military, and each one of them is a heavily atmospheric, raw reflection on where he was in his life. The last of the 4 was Ghost Pop. It was a lo-fi experiment about which he said, "That was the most unconfident album I ever made. It's all depressed and suicidal, and I think it's the last time I ever dropped my guard on record."
I still haven't gone back to his super old stuff yet. Bro, come on, man.
Now, and you could win this,
who are you?
In 2015, Peggy was honorably discharged from the military, but according to him, the story is a little more complicated than that. He said that his discharge was honorable only on paper. Obviously, he can't share that many details. It's probably classified, but in a 2018 interview, he said that he was discharged for reporting an abuse of power, and he was basically shunned by the people he knew in the military because he was seen as going against the code to report the kind of thing that he had reported. He said this, "So whenever I see him, the person he reported, I'm going to make sure that I remind him what he did and remind him how it failed and remind him how much more successful I am than he is. And I'm going to make him feel like shit. And hopefully they know what it feels like, what they did to me." After leaving the military, Peggy moved to Baltimore. He took up the name JPEGMAFIA for the first time, and he started dropping records almost immediately. His first mixtape as JPEGMAFIA, Communist Slow Jams, was a great introduction to who he was and what he stood for, or rather against. On Polly, an atmospheric track with a steel drum reverberating over the beat, he raps, "I don't give two shits about crime, barbecue Confederate flags in my spare time. 2 Glocks, 1 big 4/5, put it to the neck of every governor in office." Right out the gate, his bitter anger towards racism, injustice, and the political system is coming through loud and clear. In April 2015, soon after Peggy had moved to the city, Freddie Gray, a black resident of Baltimore, fell into a coma and died after being transported in a police vehicle. The incident resulted in massive riots throughout the city with dozens of arrests, injuries, and major property damage, especially after his death was ruled a homicide at the hands of 6 Baltimore Police Department officers. This would serve as the inspiration for Peggy's next mixtape, Dark Skin Manson, which was full of anti-racist messages with songs like "Cops Are the Target" and "I Wipe My Ass with Confederate Flags." Peggy talked about how he admired Baltimore citizens and how they felt righteous anger and actually acted on it. He said, "I respected that Baltimore was like, we're not gonna march, we're gonna break shit, because that's how shit gets done."
It's valid, man.
A year later, around the time the 2016 presidential race was really starting to pick up, Peggy's identity as an artist was also starting to come together, and he released his debut album, Black Ben Carson, named after the presidential candidate Ben Carson, a black politician whose platform represents basically every idea Peggy disagrees with. He said about this album, "Black Ben Carson is an amalgamation of all the records I've made so far. Communist Slow Jams was me confronting liberal racism and white supremacy. Dark Skin Manson was me addressing those problems again, but now speaking from the mindset of a Baltimore resident during an uprising. Black Ben Carson is me squaring up
this editing is crazy, bro.
Systems and values with one hand on my 9 and the other on my crotch."
That's hard,
Black Ben Carson was a record. It hits the listener with song after song of political messages and that same righteous anger from Dark Skin Manson.
That's my favorite Peggy cover, I think.
One of the tracks on the record, "I Just Killed a Cop, Now I'm Horny," is one of Peggy's most notorious
songs. One of my favorites.
And it generated a lot of controversy for an honestly horrifying sample. In the intro, he samples the death of a police officer caught on video in 1998, during which you can hear the screams of the officer begging for his life as he
All Caps No Spaces is also one of my favorites.
It's a disturbing song, and honestly, there are still divided opinions on it to this day. A lot of people think it's just inappropriate. It's way more than it needs to be. But Peggy himself spoke out against the backlash a few times on Twitter. One time he said, "None of you fake woke, fake liberal white bitches care about any of this. You're disingenuous as fuck, and I'll continue to mock you musically until you die." At this point in his career, Peggy was pretty much still an underground artist. He was big in Baltimore and he was doing lots of shows, but it wouldn't be until he moved to LA 2 years later that he found a mainstream audience with Veteran, his second album. Recorded
That's when I got put on to him.
Mixed and mastered in California. This album marked a change in tone for Peggy's music. He maintains the aggressively anti-racist messages and many of the political themes, but his horizons were also broadening. He said in an interview that he thinks Veteran is just as much of a political record as Black Ben Carson, but he moved away from calling out specific people and more towards large groups. And this is true. No one was safe when Veteran came out. Alt-right, neoliberals, bloggers, reviewers, even Drake for some reason, and also Morrissey from the Smiths. He was taking shots at everyone.
Drake era.
He even fired at Brooklyn gentrifiers from Williamsburg. He was rapping, "You yuppies ain't real, let you live for a fee. We taking Brooklyn back, you can leave the coffee." Wait a second, where are we recording this? Brooklyn. There's even a song named "I Cannot Fucking Wait Until Morrissey Dies," from Brooklyn because he can't stand Morrissey's James Baldwin t-shirts. He takes shots at one of his favorite targets, the alt-right, saying, "White boys getting mad because of my content. Y'all brave on the web. Keep it in the comments." This is one of the things that Peggy does best. He's knocking people off their pedestals relentlessly. He sees the gentrification problem in metropolitan areas.
I feel like
black people get pushed out.
Low key, JPEGMAFIA is like a walking Molotov cocktail, bro. Like, to be honest. And he's just lighting everything, you know, in sight on fire. just to kind of do it, you know? Like he's low key like he's a musical arsonist, honestly. And it's very cool. It's very cool.
$10 coffee and dog.
I look so bright, man.
He's more disrespect.
I tweaked some settings to try and get rid of them lines. It didn't work for real, but I just look very bright. This shirt looks white. It's gray, but it looks white. That's crazy. I just noticed that.
Black authors of all time. He turns that back on him. He does it in an aggressive way, but it's not one that alienates the listener. These are all good points that he brings up, whether you agree with him or not. He's saying some real shit.
Facts.
I wrote a couple more notes on Peggy's
Do I have the hiccups right now?
that I wanted to share, but I'm going to be recording in my bedroom and just reading off my laptop because I hadn't originally written these when we first went in the studio. You know, musically, Peggy is a genius producer. To me, you know, I love the sound and texture of everything he creates, especially knowing it all comes directly from his imagination. But the thing is, you know,
he's one of my favorite producers right now, mainly because I feel like he's the most authentic with his own sound. Like, of course he had inspirations, but he came up with his own sound and sticks to it, but like innovates every single time. I really can't think of any two Peggy songs or projects that sound alike, for real, you know, but it's still like, you know what the vibe is when you hear You Think You Know Me, or, you know, something like one of his tags, you know what you're gonna get, sort of. That's why he's one of my favorites, bro. It's just very unique, you know. A lot of people say right now every song sounds the same, which in some cases, yes. A lot of people trying to make Pierborn type beats. A lot of people trying to make Filthy type beats. A lot of people trying to make Loso type beats. You know, a lot of people trying to make Metro Boomin type beats still, even though he doesn't have a type beat anymore. You know, he's so versatile. He kind of makes whatever. Same with like Kenny beats, you know. But I feel like there's, you know, those same artists that everybody's trying to copy, and then Peggy that kind of just do their own thing. You know, and it's just so authentic and so genuine, and you can hear it, bro.
As a whole, it's not easy on the ears. These aren't pop songs. These aren't pop trap songs. These aren't drill songs. The sound of Veteran is coarse, discordant. It's industrial and intense. There are moments of real, listenable, melodic brilliance. I think DD Form 214 is one of his best.
His music sounds like McDonald's Sprite and Pins and Needles at the same time.
Produced tracks. It has
and I like it.
Amazing earworm sounds, the intense drums. It's mixed with a minimal R&B sample. Whole Foods is intimidating and weird, yet completely listenable. Overall, I want to say the sound of Veteran is like being chased by a predator through a dark alley or something. Peggy's often struggling to be heard over the overpowering instrumental as it twists and turns like some, you know, sonic monster. I kind of wonder if Peggy's instrumentals are inspired by his time in the military. The sound of ammunition, the sound of fighting in the distance maybe inspired the stressful tone of his production. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just an idea. The thing about Peggy's instrumentals in general is I do think he would be a lot more popular if his sound were easier to listen to. Because the political ideas that Peggy puts into
That's how it is with most people, though. With most artists, you know, they're not super popular until they make something that sounds, you know, inviting or very normal, you know, or sometimes it just takes people, you know, time to get into it. Like me, I feel like because I listen to so much crazy stuff, that's why I was able to appreciate a Whole Lot of Red the night it dropped. You know, there was only 2 songs that I didn't really like on Whole Lot of Red, and they're 2 of my favorites now. You know, but even still, like there were most people heard it and was like, "This is not good," because you know it wasn't normal, it wasn't inviting. It was a whole bunch of loud, distorted 808s and, you know, screeching basically, and people didn't get that. You know, even what else is kind of like that? You could even say some of Rocky's early stuff, you know, took some people time to, you know, get into. That's why, you know, he was big in New York and a little bit, you know, other places with Live Love ASAP. But when Long Live ASAP dropped, you know, that's when he kind of just blew up, because it was, you know, there was some more I heard Rocky on the radio, bro. Literally at a BP gas station at like 9 p.m. My mom was filling up the gas tank. This is in 2012. And I heard, what song did I hear? I don't remember what song I heard, right? But I heard Rocky at the gas station because it was like a pop kind of song, you know, so they were playing it on the radio. But his older stuff was not very poppy like that. And most of the rest of that album isn't, you know? I'm talking way too much, bro.
You know,
I'm talking way
it's
too
pretty
much.
commonly held sentiments among young leftists, but the thing is, not everyone is going to be down to listen
Seth
to
Rogen?
those ideas if you also have to parse abstract, combative beats. If you do have a palette for this type of sound, songs off of Veteran like Rainbow Six, Panic Emoji, Rock and Roll is Dead, they have a very powerful, imposing sound in a way that is uniquely Peggy's. So while his instrumentals may be hard to listen to in the traditional sense, they may not be. They add an element to his music to the point where I think his sound would be incomplete without it. They do add an element to his music to the point where I think his sound would be incomplete without it. If he abandoned the aggressive, fractured sound and went for a more commercial aesthetic, I just don't think it would work. I think for a lot of us, we listen to Peggy's music to hear what he has to say. We're not necessarily looking to turn up, although I have seen Peggy live. Back in 2019, I saw him
Sometimes
with
I'd be
Denzel
turned.
Curry in New York. That was a great show. The mosh pit was amazing. But I do think listening to Peggy day to day, it's a bit more cerebral than it is visceral. Veteran catapulted Peggy into fame. It was something he had never experienced before. It wasn't an entirely positive experience either, as he illustrates with this quote. Imagine you've been doing something your whole life, and one day, all of a sudden, a bunch of people who never gave a shit, all of a sudden they super duper give a shit. It's like they think the art belongs to them. They build narratives that don't exist. They make up the intentions I have behind the songs and lyrics that don't exist. He also said that you have to be mentally bulletproof to handle this level of attention. For someone who puts so much of himself into his music, I'm sure this sudden attention had to take some getting used to. In the almost 2 years between Veteran and his next project, Peggy would tour with Vince Staples, work on music in LA, and end up making more than 90 songs for his next album. A lot of songs were made with little to no editing. They were all done in one take. He wanted it to be a much more raw project than Veteran. Hype was high for this project. People loved Veteran and they wanted more. Luckily for Peggy, expectations were met. September 2019, he dropped All My Heroes Are Cornballs, and it was immediately beloved by fans and critics. The raw editing style comes through as soon as the first track starts, with the sound of glass smashing and crowd screaming filling the mix. Beta Male Strategies begins with a calming ambient vocal sample and slowly devolves into chaos, eventually leading into that signature JPEGMAFIA type beat, an aggressive, noisy track less than a minute long.
Oh, wait a second. No, that's Jesus Forgive Me on the Thought. That's one of my favorites. And also Buttermilk Jesus type beat. Also fire.
Grammarly does more than catch errors.
Who thinks I'm using Grammarly on Twitch, man?
The album as a whole is more musical than Veteran, and it also has less of a political overtone. It still has the same unstructured, kind of chaotic feeling, but the pop and R&B influences shine through a lot more, like in Free the Frail, which features Peggy singing over a dreamy melody and crackling sound effects. The beat textures on the album are honestly pretty complex. Each song has many different layers of samples, syncopated rhythms, and strange, otherworldly sound effects. It's also less of an overtly political project, at least when compared to his previous work. When he was asked if real life had gotten too insane to make fun of, Peggy said, at the end of the day, no matter how much people are talking about it, I'll say some shit about it if I feel compelled. In other words, yes, I have run out of ways to say fuck Donald Trump. All My Heroes Are Cornballs feels like a moment
I might vote for Donald Trump,
as it allowed
just to say I did it.
More creative sounds, and he was speaking less about politics, which it seems like he wasn't really interested in anymore. Not that the political messaging held him back, there's just more to Peggy than attacking people who disagree with him. This is one of my favorite things he's done so far. The tracks are varied, unique, melodic, and some of them hit pretty hard. It was also the first of his records to chart. It debuted at 105, and critics praised it for satirical lyrics, dissonance, and consistent quality. Following Cornballs, Peggy released a few EPs, but nothing major dropped until just recently, when he released hands down my favorite project.
And EP too.
LP dropped on October 22nd, 2021, and it's the culmination of Peggy's growth as a producer, a writer, and a rapper. It maintains the classic chaos and aggression of a JPEGMAFIA album, but it's calculated this time. Each song fluidly blends into the next. They all have a unique sound and feeling that's vastly different from anything
I think Sick, Nervous, and Broke is my favorite song on LP. Still not sure, but that's one I've been playing a lot over and over. So I would think it's that one.
Beautiful bossa nova sample by Stan Getz and Louise Bonfa. It adds synths, percussion, intense rapping. Hazard Duty Pay utilizes
the Hazard Duty Pay video hit 4,000 views, bro. Up there. I just realized I stopped listening to the offline version all the way. I gotta do that.
Catchy classic R&B sample with Peggy rapping about how you won't get pushed around in the industry. Thought's Prayer is a spacey, almost hyper-pop track with autotune and a chorus featuring interpolation of Britney Spears' Hit Me Baby One More Time. Overall, LP is Peggy's most colorful work yet, and I personally loved it. The quality and the creativity of his instrumentals has reached a breaking point. Honestly, I can't imagine him topping this. It's just that good. This is the perfect version of the style he's been working on for the last 5 years. But LP faced some issues during its release, as unfortunately not all the samples could be cleared, including those on Dikembe and Hazard Duty Pay. This prompted Peggy to drop an online version on streaming services and an offline version with all the uncleared samples on Bandcamp and YouTube. These are some of the best tracks on the record, so it's unfortunate they couldn't be featured in the full release. He ended a pretty long statement on his Bandcamp with, "My time in the music industry is over because I refuse to be disrespected by people who aren't respectable in the first place. The only ones I care about now and forever are you, my fans. I love you, and for you, I will always be here." This is the true LP, and I hope you all enjoy. JPEGMAFIA is one of those rare musicians whose work is incredibly honest. He speaks completely from his heart, and if that makes someone angry, I don't think he cares at all.
He says what he feels,
the thing
bro.
about Peggy being such an outspoken critic of the systems that govern society is that he knows just how bad society can be from his time in the military. He knows firsthand. He's not just some loser coming out of nowhere. He's an actual veteran who's been to war and risked his life for his country. And he came out on the other side feeling like that country doesn't care about him at all. It's a pretty popular sentiment, but he's one of the select few who's truly qualified to speak on it. If anyone has the right to criticize society, it's him. In a time when so many people just talk out of their asses, sitting on social media all day saying society should be this way, that way, Peggy has the life experience to back up his statements, even if he sometimes resorts to shock value to get his point across. Throughout history, there have always been commentators, satirists, critics, all manner of artists who, even if they face criticism or punishment, are determined to speak out against systems that they think are unjust or corrupt. In the past, Peggy would have either had his music banned, he could have been imprisoned, or in some periods of history, he could have been killed by the government for saying the things he says. Today, I don't think he has to worry quite as much, but it's still important that someone is willing to say these things at all. Without true artists like JPEGMAFIA who are willing to tear down the flag and remind us of what it really is, a piece of cloth, what's stopping us from forgetting entirely? This has been Volksgeist. Thank you for watching.
W video, bro. W video. Even that's Nico. Even you know, bigger W editing. I really enjoyed that, bro. It was cool. You know, I kind of did know a lot about Peggy just because I've watched a lot of interviews and stuff. So I wouldn't really say I learned too much, but it was still very cool. You know, I really enjoy watching these videos, bro.